These folks are serious but getting started on time. In fact, they're going to start a few minutes earlier because we want to maximize the time that we have with our elected officials and our law enforcement personnel. Could you please tell your neighbors, shh, say they're really serious but getting started on time.
They're serious but getting started on time.
There were new people who come here for the first time. We start on time and we end on time. We're going to get started a couple minutes earlier, and those who are unaware, this facility you're in is called Walter H. Bates Legacy Center. It is named after a former alderman who, among his many contributions to this community, he gave the first $500 to create a school which would later be named after him so that African American people could be educated. This Legacy Center is an important part of this community and this county's history. And for the native Neapolitans and natives of this county, what I'm about to say you already know. But I'm repeating this because there are people in this room who would not know this, and they need to know that there was a time that if you were an African American, no matter what part of the county you lived, whether you lived in Deal or Shadyside, Brooklyn or Pomfrey, no matter where you lived, Pasadena, you were required to come here. And so there are people who got to know other people around the county because families were all required to come to this particular location. Each of our meetings, we always start off with the word. And so I'm going to have the Reverend Ricky Nelson bring an invocation, and then we will go right into the program.
Brothers and sisters, let us pray. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a buckler to all those that trust in him. And like Psalm 18:30, Lord, we bow to you as the only God. We thank you for your son, Jesus Christ, who died for us on Calvary's cross. Lord, we ask that you control this meeting. Have your way. Do what you do because it's always perfect. Touch hearts and minds so that everyone under the sound of my voice will understand and remember that the government exists to serve the people. And that government officials are there, not for status, not for money, but to make sure that the government operates properly so that everyone is treated in a just and fair manner. Lord, please let these government officials talk less and listen more when the people speak. In the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Thank God. Amen. Amen.
One of the oldest, largest civil rights organizations, not in America, but in the world, was started in 1909. The Caucus is proud to be a member of that organization. It's an organization that's membership has boasted such magnificent individuals as President Barack Obama, Dr. King, among many. Locally, the NAACP has involved people who are very prominent in our community. We now bring to the podium, bring the welcome, President of the Anne Arundel County branch of the NAACP, Jackie Austin. Join us in
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
First, I would like to ask if you all, if everyone, would give Reverend Stephen Tillett and his family, keep them in prayer, as Reverend Tillett was in an auto accident and is hospitalized. So please please keep Reverend Tillett and his family in prayer. The matter of hate crime has touched Anne Arundel County deeply since the county is founded. We in the NAACP hear about these accounts firsthand, as we are very often the first point of contact for a family victimized by acts of hate and symbols intended to intimidate. The NAACP has been responding to many racial bias incidents here in Anne Arundel County. The most recent allegation of racial bias behavior has occurred at our Annapolis Christian School. On Thursday, January the 16th, the NAACP will be testifying on House Bill 0005, which is sponsored by Delegate Mark China, which is the hate crime bill. This bill will be heard in the Judiciary Committee at 1 p.m. I ask all who are present, if you can come and support, please come and support. If you can come and testify, please come and testify. We want this bill to pass this year. When we fight, we win. Thank you.
This magnificent sound system that you hear, which improves every month we've come, has been donated to us in terms of the services for doing this by a gentleman named John Wells. I'm going to ask John to come up with a very brief announcement to make as it relates to a legislative proposal that he's involved with. But would you give John Wells a round of applause for volunteering to serve?
Actually, I have to confess, I just set this up so you guys can hear me. This year, we have a legislature that is listening. We have unprecedented access to the top leadership in both the House and the Senate. I'm working in the area of tax reform, mostly in order to raise the $5 billion we need over the next 10 years for not only Kerwin, but a bunch of other good things. We're going to be sending out 2 questionnaires. And you're going to get this big, long questionnaire first, and it's about your attitudes about taxes and legislative priorities. It's really important that you just fill it out, check it off, and it'll go into our system. If we get good feedback, it's going to make our cases much stronger for a lot of these bills that affect you. Thank you.
Every month we've been meeting now for almost 3 years, and it's all volunteers. Everyone that comes here volunteers, and we've been very fortunate to have had over a time period different organizations, individuals, and groups who will help pay for the food and beverages that you consume. A couple months ago, the Annapolis Police Department provided the services, provided food. We've had different organizations, social organizations do it. This month, we're proud that the Anne Arundel County Police Department is doing it. We'd like to ask members of the department, please stand so we can give them a round of applause for providing food and beverage. And we would ask that the fire department, either with the city or the county, consider hosting it the one next month. The one next month will deal with a forum around health care or health issues. You'll be hearing a lot more about that later in the program. But again, if you are willing to do that, please contact either myself or any member of the organization to volunteer to do it. It would be greatly appreciated. One of the things that we have spent some time doing, it's now been more than a year, is we recognize the importance of communities not stereotyping people. And it's so easy for people to be stereotyped. Those of us who have watched television, we will often see young people in handcuffs involved in some criminal activity. And if you see it night after night, you might draw the conclusion that all young people engaged in that criminal activity. Nothing could be further from the truth. Images are important because people begin to believe what they see without understanding context or why certain people are portrayed a certain way. So as a means of trying to balance perspectives, once a month we work in partnership with the Altomare County Public Schools to have them present a young person who does not fit the stereotype that is often projected. I'm going to ask Dr. Lorenzo Hughes to come forward who will present our young honoree this afternoon.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's always one of the highlights of my months when I get to come to Cal, but most of all to honor one of our students. And just when we think that we've gotten the top students, they raise the bar. This month, it is our honor and privilege to recognize student recognition is being presented to Lamar Morgan in recognition of your academic performance, involvement in school and community, and displaying outstanding leadership. We do honor you as our student of the month. So Mr. Morgan, if you could come and join me here, and he will give you a little bit about him, and he's going to introduce the village that he brought with him.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lamar Morgan, and I am a senior at Old Mill High School. It is an honor to be here, and I am blessed to be receiving this award. I have been attending Old Mill nearly for 7 years, during which I've transitioned from Old Mill Middle North to the 4 years that I've been at Old Mill High School. From having the opportunity to transition from one grade level to another on the same campus has allowed me to forge strong and long-lasting connections with students and teachers that will continue long after I graduate from Old Mill High School. At Old Mill High School, I'm a member of the National Honor Society and Key Club, two different opportunities that serve a common goal, both providing me with outlets and events to reach out and serve my community. In just my senior year, I have organized fundraisers that encompass the collection and donation of supplies for Queen Elizabeth Home for Children in Grenada, helped raise funds for UNICEF to assist mothers and children suffering from hunger and lack of proper health care, provided decorated shoeboxes filled with gifts for boys and girls locally and globally for the holiday season under the Operation Christmas Child Project. My next endeavor is a book drive where I will collect and donate books of various matter to children who do not readily have available the resources to pursue a passion for reading and to further help involve reading literacy. I look forward to continuing my community's outreach well past my years in high school as I embark in 2020 into my college years in pursuit of my bachelor's and master's of either electrical engineering or physical therapy. I am inspired each and every day through the blessings I have received to continue to give back to those in need through my educational studies and community outreach. Thank you all again for this esteemed honor and award.
They all will be proud of this young man. With his relatives come forward, so we can have this photograph
let me do a quick commercial. There is a book, Memories and History of the Parole Area, that is taking place in the back. It's for sale. If you don't know the history of this community, Joyce is standing to your right. This book is excellent. It gives you some of the history that you would not necessarily know, but the parole community, which is part of Annapolis. Some of you may not even know why it's called parole. There's a reason it's called parole. Those who follow know something was once called camp parole. But Joyce says, it's my grandfather. Gene certainly used to be for a lot of property along what's known as the parole community. There are a number of events that's coming up that people in this room advocates are worried about. There are people who want you to sign up. Go down to the Maryland General Assembly to have your voice heard. In the back, there is an opportunity for you to sign up. Which being Delegate Barnett shared with me that there's legislation that's being proposed that would make it easier for people who leave in prison to be able to transition back into the society as a whole. There are other groups here advocating around health care, Medicare for all. There's a forum that's going to take place that will help to educate people as to why this single-payer system makes sense. And at next month's forum, a subcommittee has been formed to have a forum similar to the one tonight, which will focus exclusively on health-related issues and how they impact in Anne Arundel County. As that subcommittee gets its work done, we'll be publicizing the participants of that particular forum, and again, invite you to come and be part of it. The one other thing that we've done as a community, and I'm so proud of this, we understand that, to use the African proverb, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to go far, go together. We know that when people go together, they make a difference. And so, one of the things that James is going to do is pass around a basket. We collect money monthly at this particular event. And through that process, we've been able to do incredible things. We've paid off for Civil Rights Foot Soldiers Memorial that's in downtown Annapolis. Contributions help to do that. We have monthly opportunities to honor people with plaques and the like. And in addition to that, we have become, not once, not twice, but we've joined the Base Legacy Center. We're an official member of this organization. And so we ask that you give generously. Brother Charles, if you can, CJ's going to start with great, do the process. Now, generally, we have a lady who does this great song during this process. She's not here, I don't think. I can see Joy. But if there's a volunteer in the audience who feel that they are moved to sing a song, this would be a great opportunity to be discovered.
Come on, Chuck. You don't want that. You know, which part singer is Tony Spencer?
While that is going on, as we get prepared to introduce the panel, I want to put something in context. Citizens tonight will have an opportunity to ask questions of both their elected officials and police officers. All over the nation, the relationship between police and law enforcement officials have sometimes been strained. Hate crimes that Jackie mentioned, statistical data shows they're on the rise, whether it's people who attempt to destroy synagogues with Jews, or whether it's people who attempt to injure African Americans based on their color, whether it's people whose sexual orientation is different that people single out.
There's something happening in America. It's ugly. It's not good. In 2017, we saw young people by the thousands marching in Virginia. We heard someone say that good people on both sides, and it created a huge controversy. For those who have not seen this movie, as I move to introduce the panel, I beg you to go see it. I don't normally promote movies, but this one I think, for people to understand what's going on in the nation, you should see the movie. The year we live in is 2020. Most of you probably just heard that phrase, 2020. But 2020 actually means vision, good eyesight. Things are very plain today. 2020 is a year where everything is plain, right before us. If you go to see this movie that I'm advocating, you see it's called Just Mercy. And I was in the movie, in a darkened theater. And there's scenes in the movie, for those who've seen it, you know they're powerful moving scenes. But I heard something happen in the movie theater while I was sitting there, watching one of these emotional scenes. Men crying. I saw it, people being moved by one of the scenes. And without spoiling the movie, I just want to give you one scene in the movie. And I don't think I'll spoil it. But it's indicative of why this discussion we're about to have is so important. It's not a scene that takes place 100 years ago. It's not a scene that takes place even 50 years ago. It's a scene that takes place in the 80s. The place happened to be in a place called Alabama. This young man, Harvard trained, comes from a place called Delaware. He comes to visit a client. He's a lawyer. He's supposed to have all the rights entitled to being a lawyer. Correctional officer says to him, "I've never seen you before." And his response is, "Of course you haven't. I'm just here for the first time. I'm new." And then he says to the correctional officer, "Well, if you want to see your client, you need to be searched." Then he tells him to take off his clothes. And as the lawyer takes off his jacket, then his shirt, then his pants, and the man finally says to him, "No, take it all off." There are men in the movies who can empathize with him. So I'm listening to people crying. After the movie's over, I happened to go into the men's bathroom, and one of the men that was sitting behind me was still wiping tears from his eyes, and I asked him the question, "Why did that scene have that impact on you?" And he said something that directly relates to our conversation tonight. He told of a scene that didn't take place in the 80s. He didn't tell about a scene that took place in the 90s. Talked about a scene that just had recently taken place with him. And I want people to hear this and hear it well. The place happened to be Baltimore City. He and his family was visiting Baltimore City, had just left the stadium, a football game. He was stopped, pulled over. Police officers asked him to get out of the car. And he asked the question, "Why?" And without hesitation, they told him, "Shut up. Do as you're told." He got out of the car and was forced to sit on a sidewalk, a curb. Man in his 40s, professional, hit a son and a daughter, young, been with the game They watched their father being treated with disrespect. He said it hurt him. He was embarrassed, humiliated. There was nothing he could do. His children looked at him. So this scene that took place 40 years ago in a place called Alabama with a professional man he could relate to, not because he was a lawyer, not because he went to one of the finest schools in America. He could relate because he knew what it felt like to be put in a position where not only could people disrespect you, to feel that there was nothing you could do about it. If you ask most people, adults, men and women in this room, who are black, the following question, no matter whether you're President Barack Obama or just a man on the street, the answer is always the same. If you say to them, if a police officer says something to your son or daughter, it's midnight, they disrespect them, what do you advise your son or daughter to do? And every man and woman, no matter what their station in life is, rather than be an African American, would say to their daughter or their son, even if they've been disrespected by the officer, keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. And the reason they would tell them that because they want them to survive. They know what the consequences could be. And before people conclude that that is a wise counsel on the part of the elders who experience and know what America can do, here's the problem with it. The same parents that gave advice to their daughters in 2020 and their sons in 2020 not to say anything, not to do anything. 100 years ago, in 1920, parents were giving that advice. 1820, they were saying the same thing. 1720, they were saying the same thing. 1620. And suddenly you had a group of young people just said, I'm tired. So police community relations, hate crimes, are very sensitive issues in our community. If it's perceived that people don't care when a hate crime is committed, it creates problems. If it's perceived that police officers who are doing things inappropriate are not properly disciplined, it makes a difference. In our criminal justice system, we depend on our elected officials, be they judges, state's attorneys, or state senators and delegates, to make sure the law is enforced equally. And Leitess have the responsibility this evening to do three things. One, she has to define what is a hate crime. Give out her opinion as to why she thinks hate crimes are on the rise. Secondly, we've asked her to talk about her office, not unlike any other office. She used to work in Baltimore City, so she's familiar that you have police officers that sometimes don't do what they ought to do. How does her office handle police officers who are not doing the right thing? And then the third obligation we've asked her to speak to tonight, for men and women in this audience, who want to know, how do you interact with the state's attorney's office? How do you, if you got a concern, who do you contact? Who do you talk to? She has the distinction of being the first woman elected to the state's attorney's office. With no further ado, the next voice you will be hearing will be the Honorable Leitess, our state attorney.
Thank you, Carl, and it is a great honor to be here tonight. I just wanted to say that my oldest son graduated from Olton also. Congratulations. It's such an honor, and I'm so glad to hear of the great work that our honoree has tonight. Wow, that's a lot on the plate there, Carl. Let me start with the The state's attorney's office has 3 divisions, actually 2 divisions. We have a Glen Burnie District Court and Annapolis District Court. Those are our misdemeanor courts. And then we have a circuit court right here in downtown Annapolis. And every single day we have a duty attorney between the hours of 8:30 and 4:30. So if you ever have a question, you can call us up. We have a fantastic website. You can email us through the website and we'll call you back. Please don't send me a Facebook message. We get those sometimes where people are panicking on a Saturday night saying, I have to be in court on Monday, and they sent me a Facebook message. So that's hard. We don't check those as much. But we have deputy state's attorneys, we have duty attorneys, we have all kinds of folks who are on staff who can help you if you have any questions or concerns. And we also have, very importantly, victim witness advocates. So every single person who is a victim or a witness to a crime can speak to somebody who can help them and help them get services and referrals and things of that nature. So that's the easy one. So a little bit about me. I went to the University of Baltimore. I graduated in 1988, and I was a law clerk in the city of Baltimore for about 18 months. And then I was a prosecutor for 18 months. So I worked in the city of Baltimore from the summer of 1987 to the summer of 1990, a total of 3 years. Half as a law clerk and half as a prosecutor. And then I was hired by Frank Weathersby, if anyone remembers him, longtime state's attorney. He was a state's attorney for just about 29 years. And he hired me really as a brand new prosecutor, and I started the district court. And why that's important is I had the opportunity to meet 2 of our guests tonight that I'm going to make come up on this panel with me. Chief Tim Altomare.
You already made me.
Chief Altomare, who has been, I first met Chief Altomare in 1993, and I must be older than him because I had been here for 3 years by then. And he worked in the Annapolis Police Department for 5 years, so he and I used to run into each other all the time at the Annapolis District Court. He was a young police officer, and I was a young prosecutor. So one day I was totally surprised because Chief Altomare came into the district court in a completely different uniform. And he is now donning the uniform of the Anne Arundel County Police. So he began there in October of 1998 and was tapped to be the chief of police in December of 2014. And he's been our chief of police ever since. So it's another one of our forced panelists tonight, Sheriff Jim Fredericks. And I have known Jim Fredericks probably as long as he was a police officer as well. He was an Anne Arundel County police officer for 26 years. He retired as a lieutenant. I used to have lots and lots of cases with him. And he was elected our sheriff in 2018. And we hadn't had a new sheriff, I think, in about 12 years or so. So Sheriff Jim Fredericks does a fantastic job keeping our courthouse safe. He's got a tall order right now. We have a very serious case going on right now. We have a prison gang murder. And there are so many security details. We have sheriffs in plain clothes. We have sheriffs in uniform. We have hidden sheriffs. We have a dog walking around. And he's doing an amazing job keeping us safe. The Sheriff's Department does some great things too. They serve warrants. They serve domestic violence and peace order petitions, and they do about 100 other things that are too numerous to mention, but I'm very lucky to have Sheriff Jim Fredericks on our team as well, and I just wanted to recognize him. Glory, Sheriff. There you go. Last but not least, our newest addition is our brand new Annapolis Police Chief, Chief Jackson. Now he comes, everybody has a pass in Baltimore, right? He has a pass in Baltimore as well. He is a colonel. He retired from the Baltimore City Police, I believe in 2004. He was a professor of criminal justice at Baltimore City Community College. He was the Inspector General for the Baltimore Police Department, and he is now our Chief of Police of Annapolis City, and I'd like to welcome him too and invite him onto the panel as well. So a little bit about what it means to be a prosecutor. What prosecutors do? Well, we don't investigate crimes. What we do is we prosecute the cases. And what that means is we evaluate the cases that 99 out of 100 times come to us from the police department. They come to us from the Maryland State Police, Annapolis Police, Transportation Authority police, sometimes the State Department police, the DGS that protect our communities, as well as the Anne Arundel County Police. We have sometimes federal cases that come to us when the federal investigators don't want to take the case. Bank robberies being a prime example. We've had bank robberies that were investigated by the federal agents, and they don't want to go for it on the federal level. They want us to. We review cases, and sometimes guide the police if they need it. They often do not. They know what they're doing. And we sometimes give them legal advice. And why I make that distinction for you, a lot of times folks want the state's attorney's office to do something. And we have absolute immunity in the courtroom. What we do in the courtroom is protected activities, and we can't be sued in the courtroom when we are arguing a case or we're bringing a case before a judge or a grand jury. We can be sued if we bring an investigation and we mess it up somehow and we stick our nose where we're not protected, or if we give bad legal advice. So we have to be very careful what we do. So we like to work with the police. They are our partners, but we are independent from them as they are independent from us. And most of the time we confer, and I would say more times than not we agree, but there are times that we may disagree with them. But our goal is to make sure that we come up with the right thing to do. And that's what justice is. And for the state's attorney's office, you may think that all we want to do is put people in jail, and nothing could be further from the truth. We have lots and lots of cases where we have first-time offenders or minor offenders, and our goal is to make sure that those folks have an opportunity to get drug treatment if it's a drug issue, to have diversion, to perhaps get counseling. We have domestic violence cases. We have different programs we can send folks to, like the YWCA has an abuser intervention program. We have anger management programs, and then we also have some programs for youthful offenders and juvenile cases. So our goal really is to save jail for the people who are a threat to the community, who are a threat to other folks, or who are repeat offenders. And so we do everything from not going forward with the case, or diverting the case like we do with some of our minor drug cases, and getting people help before it's too late. That is our main goal that we are trying to do every day. So one of the things that I recognized right away when I became state's attorney is the need to have our community reflected in our office. And so I and my team have done everything we can to invite people who live in Anne Arundel County to come and work in Anne Arundel County. And we have sought to hire as best we can a more diverse workplace. And in the last year since I've been in office, we've hired about 47 people. And I'm very happy to say that about almost half of them have been people of color. And I think that's important because Anne Arundel County, when I was a brand new prosecutor, there was one African-American attorney. And that was very shocking to me. And I learned when I was in law school and I worked in Baltimore that there were other communities where there were a lot more African-American attorneys in Baltimore and Prince George's County and Montgomery County. And we just didn't have very many. We didn't have very many applicants. Of attorneys to choose from, and I'm very happy that we've been able to increase the hiring of a diverse workplace. And not just for attorneys, but for support staff, for paralegals, for victim witness advocates, and the like. So that's one of the things I'm most proud of. So I've been asked to talk tonight a little bit about hate crimes. And I'm going to step down from the podium in a few minutes. I brought a board. It's one of the most sensitive and most heart-wrenching situations that we have and that we encounter in the state's attorney's office when we have crimes that hurt the community and touch the community in such a way that you can just hear the pain in people's voices when they describe what happened to them. And I think it's important to talk a little bit about the law tonight so folks understand what is a hate crime and what is not a hate crime, and what can the state's attorney's office do and what can the police do. Because sometimes I think that we hear things that happen and we have a gut reaction as to why is this not a hate crime or why is this case not going forward as a hate crime. So I'm going to step down and talk a little bit about this. So there are two different types of hate crimes. One almost automatic in a hate crime, right? You don't have to investigate the person's intent, but if someone goes to a church or another place of worship and commits a crime, defaces the property, does that sort of thing, you're home free. You don't have to get into what is that person thinking, what is their intent. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit so you understand where we're coming from when we're looking at hate crimes, when it's the police department investigating the case, and when we're getting a referral from the police department. So all crimes, everywhere in the United States, fall into two categories. And one is general intent to commit the crime, and the other is specific intent to commit a crime. So I want to give you an example about an assault. If you hit somebody, or you frighten them and they think you're going to hit them or batter them, that is a general intent crime. I intend to hit this person, slap them, push them, punch them, or I'm going to scare them to make them think I'm going to. First degree assault, if I want to cause serious injury when I do that, or I want to use a weapon, or I'm going to attempt to cause serious injury, is a specific intent crime. I intend to hit or punch or hurt or point a gun, but I intend to hurt them very badly and endanger their life severely. So do you see the difference between general and specific? That is a good starting place to talk about a hate crime. Because a hate crime is a specific intent crime. You have to do the crime, the underlying crime, plus you have to have that intent on top. So our legislators wrote the law very, very narrowly. And they wrote, and this is exactly verbatim from our criminal law, that because of another person's race, color, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, gender, disability, national origin, or because another is homeless, a person may not commit a crime or try to commit a crime, damage the real or personal property of that person, deface, damage, or destroy, or attempt to do that, or burn or attempt to burn, or commit any felony against them because of. And it's a but-for analysis. So what I think is happening sometimes when I see things that are very upsetting in the community sees the crime, and they think automatically that qualifies as a hate crime. But we can't start at the crime and go up. We have to start at the because. So sometimes you may have a crime, you may have a trespass, or a harassment, or an assault, but you have to have this extra layer on top. So as an example, if you are in an argument with somebody at a store, and they call you a racial slur, that is horrific, and that is a racial incident. But unless they punch you or hit you or scare you thinking that you're going to be hurt, it's probably not a hate crime. You have to have both. You have to have the underlying crime, and then you have to have the layer of the intent, the mens rea, what the person is thinking. And our courts demand not that someone has ever been racist or has ever spouted racial animus, but at that time that they're committing the crime, they're doing it because of that reason. So I think what we're seeing sometimes is we are having a crime occur, and then we're looking backward, and we're looking into this person's past, and are they racist, and what are they saying on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. But the court is going to require us to prove it right then and there. What is happening at that moment? Now, how do we do that? You might think that's a completely impossible task. Well, let me tell you, it's pretty tough. But we have people make confessions. We have people make statements during the crime of why they're doing it. Think of it this way. Someone has to seek another person out for that purpose. If you're going out and you're looking to harm homeless people and assault homeless people, that would be an example. So we saw that in the Prince George's County murder, right? A lot of people were shocked by that, right? Because we thought that's a murder, it made no sense, but we have to prove the because of. And the because of is the key component of the hate crime inquiry. Does anybody have any questions about that as we start? Yes, sir.
So my concern, and lot of the folks that went down to Prince George's Court to witness the decision is not in the letter of the law. We understand how it can be interpreted. Our concern is the inequity in the interpretation. In other words, say that I were an avowed member of the Black Panthers and had a series of websites that asserted that I felt the black race to be of greater value in some capacity. And then I commit a crime, but ostensibly don't indicate that because the individual who's the victim of that crime happens to be white, and perhaps even in self-defense I murder them. I do not believe that the law has historically protected me in the same capacity as it protected the young man that stabbed the black young man in Prince George's County. So this is the problem that I have. Not understanding the logistics of the concept, but the unequal application.
Sure, and that is a valid concern because we can see that time and time again of how people are treated. Some people get bail when they're awaiting trial for murder, and some people don't get bail, and we see that. I see it. I see white privilege sometimes in the courthouse, and it's astonishing. And sometimes it's right in your face, and sometimes it's subtle. But the point being is, the person who was convicted of first-degree murder, he is subject to the most maximum sentence in the state of Maryland, life in prison without parole. And the racial hate crime portion of it would have added 20 years. 20 years. So, you can't get life without parole plus 20, you're already at your maximum. So I understand what you're saying, but it's the because of. So here's an example that people give me. And again, please do not shoot the messenger. It's hard sometimes when you tell people what the law is, right? And people are like, that's terrible, it's outrage. And I get, those results. I'm sorry. I'm not a legislator. So if you got into a road rage accident with somebody, right? Someone cut you off, and everybody's giving each other the finger, and you get out and you have a fist fight, and one person is of one race and one is the other, and whoever one of those people may have racist things on their Facebook page, or maybe they've said racial slurs in the past. Is that a racial incident, or is that a road rage incident between two people in a terrible situation with pressure? So you can see the dilemma. And so let me tell you that it's the fact finder, the judge or the jury who is deciding the case, who gets to make that decision. And the state, the prosecutor, has to prove but for that person's race, gender, homelessness, that sort of thing, this crime wouldn't have happened. So literally think of it as I am seeking somebody out because they are African American or Jewish or homeless. I am seeking to commit the crime against that person. That's the standard. So.
Let me interject. Let me do two things. One, I want to make sure that we're going to open this up to a discussion and a dialogue. And so I want people have as much opportunity to be able to ask questions as possible. I also want to fine-tune stuff, because what people in the audience need to understand, the law enforcement officials do, it doesn't start with the state's attorney's office. When a police officer comes on the scene that she's describing, some judgments have to be made. There comes some training. The state's attorney's office, she calls it fact finding, but initially somebody's arrested by police officers and some decisions are made. How people get charged depends on how police officers see certain circumstances. So what I'd like to do is ask people in the audience who would like to ask a question on any subject dealing with the criminal justice system. We have an opportunity to take advantage of some very skilled people in the room who are law enforcement officials, as well as state's attorney. And before we start the questions, I want to acknowledge in the room our elected officials who are present, who is state's attorney said she's not Rather than no Charles, is she still with us?
Just left.
Okay, and I believe where this woman came in second, did the impossible. She was able to win a countywide race, provided up to the judge, Vicki Gibson. Other elected officials in the room that I may miss.
Delegate Mike Rogers was here yesterday.
Delegate Mike Rogers was here, and I also want to do a quick commercial before we go to the floor. I understand from email I got a note that a former county executive who was convicted and forced out of office is now running for the Board of Education. And now we're looking for candidates who would be interested in running for the Board of Education, because we really need to be able to set measures. And there should be people, I think, capable of running. It's District 2. Is that the seat?
Yes.
District 2. So,
24th of this month is the last day to register.
the 24th? Okay.
District 3 is a candidate too, yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, for those who would like to ask questions, please line up in front of the mic. Whatever the question you have, try to make it as succinct as possible. If it's something you would like the state's attorney to answer, feel free to. Or if you'd like to direct it to any member of the panel. My job is to kind of keep it moving. So I'm going to ask the panel members to be as succinct as they can, and also the questions to be as succinct as they can. Judge, you have a question? Go right ahead.
I do have a question. So, to the extent that intent might, a determination of intent might be kind of covered by the person who's making that interpretation's biases, it's my understanding, I think I saw an article back in 2018 that you were exhibiting some very forward thinking and said that you were going to implement some implicit bias training once you took over. So I was wondering how that was going and if that's impacted on any decision making so far.
Well, I think that we have to, our State's Attorneys Association, we have a Maryland State's Attorneys Association, and I've made sure that every single prosecutor in the office who has not been trained, we underwent that training last year in 2018, the new ones in 2019, and we redo it as much as we can. We're working with my deputy state's attorney to get the rest of our staff trained, but our attorneys have been trained. And I can tell you that having a diverse workplace is very effective in having different points of view. Our police department, county police, and city police are very diverse, so we have those points of view too. And I'm going to tell you that as prosecutors, people may not understand this, but I don't serve any one goal. I don't serve the police, and I don't necessarily 100%, and I don't 100% serve only somebody's like a victim or a witness's desires. What I serve is the community and the law. And what that means is, if I don't have the law on my side, if I don't have the facts on my side, I can't go forward with the case. I actually take an oath of office, and every prosecutor takes an oath of office, that they are not to go forward unless they have probable cause to believe that a crime occurred and that the defendant or the suspect is the one who did it. The police take the same oath. And so we have people, and we have people that we know have committed serious crimes. We know who they are. And we can't do anything sometimes. And so we may have a desire to go forward in a case, but we can't, because we honor the law and we honor the facts we have. We deal with what we have. And so we have to keep that in mind all the time. And part of your question is, we are literally trained from our very beginning as prosecutors. There's actually a set of rules for prosecutors of how we're supposed to behave and how we can't use cases for our own agenda or to satisfy the community. And being on both ends of that, I've had cases where I've had people angry at me, the police department angry at me, because they thought I was prosecuting a police officer who was really an investigator from the New Jersey prosecutor's office. And people were really mad that I prosecuted this African-American guy who shot a white guy There was racial yelling back and forth, but what people didn't understand is that they didn't have the backstory. They didn't know what the suspect's wife had told the police. They didn't know that the suspect had a history of road rage, of pulling guns on people, of accosting his neighbor, of lying in internal affairs cases. So people don't know everything that I know or what the prosecutors know, but people judge and they have that opinion. And then just that exact same year, we had a young African-American man who was shot by a white Air Force officer on a porch, and the Air Force officer claimed that it was a home invasion. And it wasn't. It was a young African-American guy who came on the porch to talk to his girlfriend, who happened to be the wife of the defendant. And he made the mistake of knocking on the door and wanting to talk to his girlfriend and getting into an argument. And when he was called a racial slur and pushed the door open to say, "Don't call me that," the defendant, the white man, shot the black man on the porch. Okay, so sometimes in the prosecutor's office, you cannot win, right? You do the right thing and you follow the law and you follow the facts, and the jury gets to decide and the judge decides, but we can't look at, the color of somebody's skin, right? We have to look at the law, and there was no home invasion, and there was no, state's attorney prosecuting a police officer. There was a prosecutor's office, and by the way, all of those cases came to me through the police department. I didn't make them up. They came to me after police investigations, and we take those cases to trial when we think that the law is there. Because that's one of the things that we have to really be careful of, is that we don't treat people differently, right? And we have checks with ourselves to make sure, what would we do if this person was this, or what would we do? We have to make sure that we're not letting our judgment be influenced by those kinds of things.
Let me interject at that point. I know that Sergeant Williams, retired with the Baltimore County Police, raised the issue as a member of our subcommittee around who should go on the police list. And I indicated to the state's attorneys this would probably come up. It's a great opportunity, Randy, if you could present the question around how this list is and kind of educate the community, how these lists get formed. And what I'd like to have the police department do is respond to whether they have any system in place when a police officer is accused of or found guilty of doing something inappropriate, whether there's any system in place to ensure that he or she doesn't testify. Ready? Yes, sir. So people can hear you. Randy, by the way, served 20 years in the Baltimore County Police Department. Let's give him a round of applause. Yes, sir.
I know everybody, I know Chief guys. What's more than you talk? Don't know the shit about it. The question I have is, I'm not going to get into specific details. I've seen stuff in the media, the Capital Gazette, about officers who possibly was less than true. In cases. Can you hear me? Yeah. We're talking about stupid. So I'm not going to get into particulars because there's information.
Right. What I want you to do for the audience that is not as familiar, remember these are lay people. Explain very quickly why a list is created. They have in Baltimore City, they have in Baltimore County, Howard County. Want to know whether it exists here or down the road. Then we have the police respond.
All right. Giglio and Brady are two case laws that were litigated in the courts in reference to truthfulness in policing. Protocols right now are different from agency to agency. Some agencies have protocols, some don't. Say it's intentional, unintentional, I don't know. If an officer lies on stand, an official investigation, they go on what's called a Giglio, Brady, or disclosure list. It comes in many names. The law doesn't state that the officer should be fired if they're less than honest in those records. What it says is you go on this list. Now, in some cases, if they meet all the pillars of Giglio and Brady, they can never testify in court ever again because their testimony will forever be impeached. In lesser cases, right, when there's circumstances and scenarios in which this occurs. If an officer lies in the report, I'm a sergeant, I'm a lieutenant, I'm a captain, it's like, hey, Sergeant Jones, Officer Jones, Central Records is looking for this rape report and It's been 72 hours and they haven't received it. Where is it? And the officer responds, oh, you know what, Captain? I'm helping somebody else on a different crime. I already finished it. I'll have it on your desk in 2 hours. Well, find out the next day, he finished it, put it on your desk that morning, but he was less than truthful. He didn't finish it, he forgot about it. Or he was just lazy. Should that officer be fired? Now, we can go back and forth and say he should, because there are lies that are called administrative lies, right? It really doesn't do any harm to the
How
community.
does, in your experience, the question is, as a police officer, former police officer, when someone was less than truthful, how did they wind up on this list? What's the process? Is it the police that makes the determination, generally, who doesn't testify? It's the state's attorney's office? Explain that to us, and then we'll have the panel respond.
Okay. So in that case, that scenario I was just mentioning, it's administrative lie, right? So the officer's charged and is sent to internal affairs. Internal affairs investigated and they deem it to be sustained, guilty of lying. During that administrative investigation or an internal affairs investigation, right? What's the protocol? Because again, certain agencies have a protocol and say, we're going to notify the state's attorney's office.
The protocol for Baltimore County, so what I want to get to,
Baltimore County.
see what Anne Arundel counties, if they have a protocol.
Okay, Carl, I'm writing this, I swear. Baltimore County doesn't have a protocol.
Okay.
There is no process of notifying the state's attorneys. And there's reasons for it. Well, we're still investigating it. We didn't deem it to be a lie. We're still investigating it, so we don't want to notify the state's attorney's office before sustained or not sustained. So there's a kind of a heads-up process. We can give them a heads-up. This is what we're investigating, right? But there's no written policy. Now, I talk to a lot of police chiefs throughout the state, and they say, well, we don't maintain a list. The state's attorney's office maintains a list. My question to them is, well, where did they get the list from? They get it from the police department. So why don't you maintain a list? Your list should match their list, right? One of the things we did in Baltimore County when I was still working was the state's attorney, the officer of law, here would be the city manager, the police chief, and internal affairs commander sat down in the same room and they went through all of the cases in internal affairs in reference to illegal immigration. And they said, these officers can never testify in court, but they don't meet all the pillars of case should be fine. And it'll be on a case-by-case basis. But these five, and memory serves me right, I think it was 105 officers in Baltimore County. Now, Baltimore County is a large agency, they have nearly 1,900 officers. I think it was 105, and they said, okay, these 100 can still testify, but these 5, they can't.
Okay,
They were all put on notice and say, you have to go.
let's find out what the protocol is. Let's start with the chief, because it starts according to him. It starts with the police department. Chief, do you have a protocol? We'll start with the county and we'll ask them.
Sure.
And then,
You can see everyone.
here's the mic right here. They'll pass it to you.
There you go.
Thank you for the opportunity. Please excuse my voice, folks. I have some air raid stuff going on, so I'll try to make it so you can hear me. It's a singular standard for the Anne Arundel County Police Department. There is no administrative lying versus criminal lying. You lie in reference to this badge since the moment I've become chief of police. You are leaving my police department. But I gotta prove it, right? So day one, the very day that I find out that we have a question about somebody's integrity or whether they committed a criminal act, that day, the state's attorney's office is notified. I will be 100% open with you. It is not me normally calling in. It is normally my commander of internal affairs in the back calling Brian Marsh with this administration, with this state's attorney's office. But that day, the complaint is communicated. The complaint is fully investigated. If it is sustained, there is only one punishment on the Anne Arundel County Police Department for lying. Administratively, in court, not to your wife. I don't get in the business of whether you're lying to your wife. But if you lie as it relates to this badge, there is only one punishment, and that is you gotta leave the police department. In the 5.5 years I've been chief, we have had one case where I lost a trial board. If I lose a trial board, that's by definition saying the person's not guilty of what I thought he was guilty of. We have not held one person I'll defer to Ann about a list. Our conversations have always been, we do not have a list per se, but I will say this. On those occasions where the investigation was not sustained, we re-communicate with the state's attorney's office, let them know that the complaint about integrity was not sustained. And then I'll allow her to answer what happens after that. But there's only one punishment if we prove you're lying, and that's, you gotta leave.
Okay, I want to start with what a list is and why a list has to be created. A list had to be created because there were some police departments that did not act when they had complaints against police officers. And so the result was the state's attorney's offices had to have some type of internal mechanism to keep track if there was an integrity issue or an excessive force issue or something like that. So let's use Baltimore City as an example. I've worked there twice, 7 years total, so I can tell you from my experience. There could be people who were investigated for saying something inappropriate in a warrant or a line, and they never were fired. They were never dealt with. And so out of frustration, the prosecutors kept this so-called Brady list. We don't do that in Anne Arundel County. We don't need to. And the reason why is because people generally quit or they are fired if it gets to that point. But let me tell you what we do have. We have something completely separate from a so-called Brady list. We have a notification list. And so if we get a phone call that an officer is being investigated for a crime or an integrity issue or is suspended, we have a case file system. Every single person who is listed as a witness at the state's attorney's office. So if you're an officer who does DUI traffic stops and your name comes up in our computer list, and we know that you're under investigation or there's an implication that you're charged with a crime or accused of a crime, we have a flag system. And we notify our prosecutors. We then send out a letter to the defense attorneys if appropriate, if, for example, an integrity violation. And we notify the defense attorneys that this is going on and they have the right to file with the court a motion or a subpoena to get those records if appropriate. Now, under the law, the state's attorney's office is not allowed to turn over officers' employment records. Those are protected. Just like everybody in this room, if you work for an employee, for employment, I cannot get your records because they are private. So, but what we can do is we can notify the other side if there's a problem, and we give them the opportunity to investigate, and then a judge rules if it's appropriate or not. And sometimes that equals seeing behind closed doors those records. But it's been my experience that it's very, very rare. I have never seen anybody who has remained a police officer from either Annapolis Police Department or Anne Arundel County who has a serious integrity violation.
Well, let me interject.
That I've seen.
And hold on. Now that Chief Jackson is on, of course, the department, but there have been people, it's public information, where police officers have found to have lied. It's a matter of public record. This is not something hidden.
So
let me just finish this thought. We had publicly 2 police officers, front page news story, where a police officer who had a body camera ordered another police officer to arrest someone. Your office dropped the charges.
That was Wes Adams' office, not my office.
Well, no, when I said your office, I mean
Yeah.
the state's attorney's office. But they dropped the charges, and they dropped the charges because it was clear, in my opinion, that they believed that the police officer was acting inappropriate.
Or they thought they couldn't win beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, it's not lying. I mean, let me tell you something. It is not unusual, especially body worn camera, if one officer says, you know, this person was charging at the scene and they were about to jump on this person and I sprayed him with pepper spray. And I'm not here to defend those facts, but I'm telling you that there are things for it to be sustained or just someone to make a judgment that someone is lying. We have to have a trial board. We have to have an inquiry or some type of...
But we're not talking about the trial board.
Okay.
I don't get into these.
No, I understand. I mean, there are going to be cases that people are going to, you know, if you think that someone should be fired because of behavior or someone should, you know, again, I have to go back to this is an employment matter. And if someone says, I don't think I have enough to arrest, and a superior officer says, well, didn't you say that the person charged at you and that you deployed your pepper spray? Well, that's hindering. And if the other officer doesn't know it or didn't think it, that doesn't mean that someone's lying. These are judgments, because I can tell you every day in our courthouse, there are junior prosecutors who don't know the law as much as another person. And I understand that the interpretation is someone lied or that they didn't have evidence, but there's also other interpretations. And, that can be litigated in a courthouse. We can disclose that to the other side if we think that someone is lying. But there also can be differences of opinion. And it is not unusual for prosecutors and police to have differences of opinion, whether there's probable cause or not probable cause. And if someone is not acting in good faith, and we see a pattern of that with the police officer, I can tell you we would bring it to the attention. We don't just get our information from the police, we get it from the court, we get it from defense attorneys and prosecutors, and we act upon it. But there are things that happen that are upsetting to the community, but for it to be a clear violation, we have to have it come from someplace, either a court decision or an internal affairs decision, or we see it ourselves as someone lying and changing things. So I just want to say, if someone has something that happens at work and they're a police officer and it's something that has to be disclosed, our duty under the law is to disclose that fact to the other side, and that gets litigated in court. And if there is a finding that someone has lied or they have an integrity problem, that will get hashed out in court. But my job is to disclose that information to the other side so that the person who's charged doesn't get an unfair trial.
Let me have the sheriff and Chief Jackson respond. The question of if a police officer, and in this case a sheriff, is found to have done something inappropriate where he lies, do you have any protocol? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so in a similar fashion, we don't have a set protocol. As a matter of fact, I'm dealing with about 12 years of unattended to departmental procedures within the sheriff's office, which we're updating now. There are some antiquated policies in there which we need to fix. And I have made that note here, Carl, about looking at any Brady issues or policy regarding that. But we'll research it and see. But right now, I know there's no standing policy on it. But I'm fully lockstep with the chief here in that we spend our entire careers based in that foundation of integrity, and it is absolutely an affront to any of us up here. When we catch anybody that's lying like that, and I'm fully on board with the exact same policy that if they're caught lying, we find them guilty in an internal procedure. My policy, my personal policy, is to terminate.
Chief? Yes, the same holds true for me. But let me get back to Brady and Giglio. Brady's Supreme Court decision, I believe Brady actually was an appellate court decision. It's a Maryland case. And what it says, it's broader than what was discussed. And I learned this at the Inspector General. The Brady case pretty much states that an officer's past behavior doesn't always have to be perjury or lying under oath. Any behavior that may shed light on the case is subject to discovery. If the agency is served with subpoena ducis tecum, a subpoena, to turn over the officer's records, then we have to obey the courts and turn over those records. But I don't want the audience to think that it's specifically for perjury. In the Brady case, it could be for any. You have officers who are just bad actors. They use excessive force. They do a whole lot of other things. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have the ability to testify under oath. It doesn't mean that their integrity to testify under oath has been compromised. But to answer the question, it is definitely my policy, and I'm still working on policies. I've been the chief of Annapolis Police, it's not even 6 months yet, so I'm still taking that dive underwater to see how the Annapolis Police Department thoroughly operates. But one thing that I don't have to do, and the deputy chief and I discussed today, whether there's an act of perjury committed by the officer or the subordination of perjury, meaning that a supervisor convinces them to lie, they both will be dealt with severely and swiftly. I don't care the the biggest weapon that an officer has in any law enforcement agency, here in Anne Arundel County, the city of Annapolis, Baltimore, anywhere in the station, the biggest weapon is not your handgun that they issue, it's your credibility in court. I don't care how many guns and tasers and hand grenades you put on an officer to go out there and enforce the law. If they don't have the ability to testify under oath because of some past practices, then they have no place in any police department, and surely they don't have it in the city of Annapolis.
All right, I made it very general when I made the statement. That's why I talked about administrative investigation. So I made it broad because the law is broad. Right? So it's not my law, it's the law.
Yeah, let me say this real quick, because we don't put officers on the stand. I have a very distinguished state's attorney here. We can only, the policy would be if the state's attorney's office says officer so-and-so, whatever the officer's name is, believed to have engaged in an act of perjury, then exactly right, under the law enforcement officer's Bill of Rights, depending on the officer's years of service, would determine the course of investigation. A 25-year-old officer that's accused of misconduct is going to be treated differently than a probationary, not because of my subjectivity, because the law says we have to under the Maryland Officers Law, which I know you're well aware of. So that means that officer gets to be investigated, we have to have a sustained finding, and it also has to be taken to a trial board because they have property rights to their job. So if the Honorable Ann Leitess comes to me, her office, one of her deputy attorneys says, this officer clearly lied, not only under oath, but in a written document. You can purge yourself both in a written fashion and orally. They lied in a search and seizure warrant, or they lied in the application for a statement of probable cause. Then we will investigate it, and once we get a sustained finding, if that officer is a veteran officer, then we'll charge them, and then we'll tell them what the charges are, and we'll tell them what our view is, termination, and then we'll go and we'll pursue them. If we get a list that says these 10 officers can't testify, then we'll investigate it. But we don't generate the list because we don't put the officers on the stand. I'm not a prosecutor, I'm a police administrator. So if the courts tell me that this person's testimony is no longer any good, then we're investigating. And then once we have a sustained finding, then we want to relieve the citizens of Annapolis of their burden of having a corrupt officer.
I agree, Chief Jackson. My point, I'm going to reiterate the point. That's why I said specifically when I first came up here with the microphone, I'm not going to get into the minutia of the specific cases because there's information that I don't have. I thought I made that clear, right? My point is to the panel. One, do you have a protocol? Written. 2 out of 3 said, we don't, we're working on it. Antiquated policies. Secondly, I'll add to, in your internal affairs policies, do you have an internal affairs policy that strictly deals with officers, or do you have a subset policy that deal with officers and supervisors who do the things that you're alleging?
And we have both. And to answer your question, you're right, the internal affairs general misconduct would take care of officers lying on the court.
Yeah, I read Annapolis policy because I actually critiqued and helped rewrite 80% of those for free of charge, right, prior to being here. And one of the things that I did not see was an internal fair process for supervisors who lied, over-delegated, didn't handle their administrative policies, influenced others to lie, right? So a section of the internal affairs process or policy needs to be developed. And I know because I did Annapolis, like 80%. But here's my question, right, to reiterate when I first came into the microphone. I didn't want to get into minutiae. I understand the process of legally on radio. I used to teach in Baltimore County on 9 yards. I get it. My question was for best practices. This is coming from the law enforcement and the state's attorney. Are you willing, all of you, willing to have the state's attorney, the officer of law, city manager, whatever you call it, the internal affairs commander, all sit in the same office along with the chiefs and the sheriff, and sit down and look at any cases? Because yes, in court, if an officer lies, the state's attorney will be notified by the ASAs, assistant state's attorneys, district attorneys, whatever they call them. And they will say, this officer lied, they're going on our list. Simultaneously, they should be going on your list. But they don't get all the information. There's internal affairs investigations, as Chief Altomare said, where officers are sustained. Now, he fires. He said, if you lie, you're fired. He has if you lie, I have a no-lie decree.
So let me just interject because...
Or you have to
or they have to.
So it sounded like to me,
That's right.
the question just it's not one that we need to spend a lot of time on, because I want to give other people an opportunity to have questions. We now have established that there's no protocol.
No, there is a protocol.
No, there's no protocol for creating lists. You said that earlier.
No, protocol for creating lists. I need to reiterate this. We don't need a list because if someone is under investigation, there's a flag in our system, and if they are ever called as a witness, and what we have seen is those folks are gone.
That's not true.
They're being...
And listen,
If
and
they're
no, listen, that's not true. And I can tell you it's not true because it's public information. Now, dealing with the Dallas Police Department, there have been at least 3 cases. One dealt with a police officer who committed perjury. She admitted it. It's a matter of record. This happened, and she didn't get fired.
Okay, what I'm saying, Carl, what I'm saying is you're saying that we have to have a list. If a person is never called, if someone is in the police department and they're not fired for whatever they do, and we're not calling them as a witness, it is not the state's attorney's concern. And I know who you're talking about. That person has not testified in years and years and years, and I've been told that person doesn't work for the Annapolis Police Department anymore. Well, what I'm saying is, if someone is no longer a police officer and is no longer a witness in a case, there's no list to put them on because they're not a summoned witness. What we're obligated to do under the law is to make sure that we notify and we don't put anybody on who has an integrity issue. So if that person, if a police officer, police department takes somebody and says, okay, you're going to work in the property division, and they're not a witness.
I'm going to interject. I want to wait before witness. I got it. Here's what I'd like to do for the next few moments. There's some advice I was given early on. I think it's wise. Randy, after you make your comments, I want to move on to the next person. Here's what I want people to do. Listen to me. What I like people to do, people at the table, is to listen. Listen. That was what the advice was. You don't have to agree, but just listen to what people are saying. Because perception is important. And I just want people to understand what I'm saying. I didn't spend this moment laying out how people felt who saw the movie, Just Mercy. These are perceptions. So as people give whatever question they have, a question, we're going to get into many questions as we can. And then after the questions are given by more than one person, we're then going to ask the panel members to respond to the questions that they hear. So, Reverend Morris, if you've got a question, what is the question? If you got a question, what's the question?
You're talking to me now?
I am talking to you.
All right, thank you. Well, I first want to say that until we acknowledge that we do have problems and concerns between the people and our police officers and our police reports and our criminal justice system, we're not going to accomplish anything in this room. So the question I have is, I heard something about internal affairs and the officers. I want to ask this question. Is the only time the integrity or honesty of an officer in question only if the report comes through internal affairs? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Here's what and they're going to answer. What I want to do is give people an opportunity to ask questions. Then I'm going to respond to that. So let's get 2 other questions. Tony, would you come with a question?
Sure. My question is, there appears to be a disparity as to the race of people being able to access drug court. I would like to know why that is.
I'm going to take a moment to set the context. For 3 years, Delegate Mark Chang has introduced a hate crimes bill into the Maryland state legislation. It has not passed. It's down to about 3 sentences. At this point, it's about like this. You can't inscribe or hang a swastika, a noose, and I believe there's one other symbol on private property, and it doesn't even say private property, on property without the permission of the property owner. and the punishments are small, like $5,000 max. This is the state of Maryland's proposed hate crime bill, which has not been able to pass in 3 years.
So the question
When that
is-
comes up, will each of you go and testify? And when you do, how would you testify? Thank you.
We'll start with Chief Altomare, and then we'll go down and have people respond to those questions that's been asked. First is will you testify on the hate crime bill?
So here's my promise. I will be talking to Delegate Chang by 9:30 tomorrow morning, and we'll absolutely talk about it. I gotta be honest with you. There's so much going on once the legislative session starts. I know that there's hate crime changes going in. I don't know exactly what it says, but I promise you this, I'll talk to him in the morning.
And Chief, would you respond to Reverend Moore's question?
Yes, sir, of course.
Internal affairs.
So the truth of the matter is, I would say most complaints, period, and then certainty, integrity violations end up being internally generated by the police departments. I think we're in that 80 to 85 percentile range of our complaints where the police department says the officer did something wrong, whether it's integrity, whether it's excessive force, whether it's you messed up this evidence thing, whether it's you're cursed at a citizen. The vast majority of those complaints come from supervisors and other officers on the police department. That holds true with integrity cases. The last integrity case that I can think of, and an officer left the Anne Arundel County Police Department on January 1st, was generated by the police department in the courts. The police department stepped forward and the courts confirmed the information.
Thank you. And the same question, will you testify, was the question.
So, sure, I've already talked to Delegate Chang and to Delegate Bartlett, and I'd already agreed to testify. In fact, I've testified, as I recall, the first year or two that the bill was out, so I've already done that. And I wanted, Tony Pratt-Strong had asked a question. Tony, you should talk to Rhonda Pundell-Charles. She and I had a meeting a few months ago with Tia Lewis, my spokesperson, and Jessica Daigle, and the drug court was actually more than representative of folks in the community of diversity. She actually expressed that same concern, and we actually had a printout for her and showed her that it is a racially inclusive drug court. Now, drug court is someone has to agree to it, their case has to be appropriate for it, and then they have to sign the contract. And we more times than not reach out to applicants to do that, but not everybody agrees to do drug court. But I don't have those stats for you, but I actually met with Rhonda because she was concerned, and we showed her that that was not the case. It is very racially inclusive for drug court.
Is it a place where I can receive those stats?
Sure. Brian Marsh is my deputy, and Tia Lewis, my spokeswoman. If you want to leave a telephone number, we can give you the breakdown, because there was a concern, especially for Annapolis Annapolis City, to make sure it was representative.
Sure, will you testify, that's the one on the hate crime?
Sure. Delegate Chang and I have a great relationship. He has 3 bills, actually, he's written for me in this session. And anytime we can try to stomp out a little bit more hate in the community, I'm all for it. And if he wants me to, I'm happy to help him out.
Chief Jackson.
Yes, same here. I'll join the sheriff and Chief Altomare, and I'll be more than willing to testify and offer any assistance that I can to make sure that the bill is successful in prosecuting hate crimes.
Here are the next 3 questions, and I want to remind everybody, we end at 8, so keep that in mind. Go right ahead.
Sure. Chief Jackson, Sheriff Fredericks, State's Attorney, and Chief Altomare.
Can't hear you. Get close.
Randy messed this mic up when he pushed it up. I have just a quick question about if there's a statute of limitations on the list that we were mentioning earlier. And I also wanted to point out a lot of the issues with the systemic change. I think systemic change has to do with changing the way we're doing things. I know we have a lot of folks across the nation trying out some new stuff. For example, Suffolk County District Attorney's Office Rachel Rollins. I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on some of the new ways that she is trying to make it easier to bring justice from our kind of internal issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, are we in?
Let's go back to the question.
Yes, I wanted to ask sort of a follow-up on the equity question that was asked before, specifically with regard to some issues in our public schools. There was concern, I think, several months ago when a list came out of disproportionate numbers of young African-American men, particularly to Rundle, who were, was it Rundle High? Okay, me. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, me, who were being arrested. And I just wondered what the status is at this point of your work with the schools and where are we headed with this, because clearly we have an issue and we need to get some better resolution. Thank you.
Next question.
How you doing? I just wanted to ask what was the procedure in Annapolis and Anne Arundel County training for police officers and so forth for diversity, diversity training in terms and actually in screening. People are applying to become police officers. We're talking all about the integrity and so forth. What type of procedures are in place, before they become police officers to actually screen that integrity? And are they really being trained in terms of the religious and racial diversity?
Thank you. Last questions? Julie? What's your question?
My question relates to how we have so much hate in our society. And I hate to bring up my same old song, but some years ago, I had an encounter and my department told me, you don't treat the black kids right. You treat them just like the white kids. You don't keep them in their place, and it makes me sick. And when I had to go to the administration and say, please help me. This woman hates me. She's trying to get me in trouble. I can't endure the daily confrontation. The vice principal said, you get this straight. She never said any such thing. And the principal said, you know the kind of trouble this could cause. If word of this ever leaves this office, you'll be charged with insubordination and you will be terminated that very day. Now the question is, was I treating the kids wrong? And what's the right way to treat them? And what's the right way to treat the white kids? And we as a society are struggling with those kids. And yes, it was a long time ago, and they're not kids anymore.
Okay, I got the gist of it. I've got a minute long. Chief, you respond to the question dealing with Meade High School that was raised.
Yes, sir. Man, and it was a great question. So, without a doubt, there is way too much disproportionality going on with the arrest statistics at Meade. There's too much disproportionality in arrest statistics across the board in this country. I don't want to drag him into my private trials tonight, but if Will Rouse still sitting in the back, he left. Will Rouse says every day, we have not invested in the kids and communities that need it most in this county for 30 years.
Amen. Amen.
I say it too, by the way. Let me say that. And there ain't no other way to say it, but they're communities of color for the most part where the underinvestment has occurred. Meade is a perfect example of that. So A, we're working on that with the school board. Carl's gonna say to me, have you got your training done yet tonight? We didn't get it done by Christmas time is my understanding. I'm looking at my deputy chiefs. We haven't gotten the school board training done yet. We're still working on it. But I'm gonna tell you about investment. We didn't wait for that story to hit to know we had a problem at Meade High School. I've been chief 5 years and change. There's a reason that our youth activities program centers almost exclusively on kids who go into that feeder system. Trauma, poverty, lack of opportunity, lack of hope. All those things are things we've started working on in this police department because we knew it was a problem. I've got to expand my youth activities program. I've got to get better. I've got to figure out how to spend more money. But every investment we make in a kid that doesn't involve trauma or handcuffs is a win as we move forward. So ma'am, I'm going to acknowledge 100%. We got to work on the disproportionality. My boss is 100% committed to working on the disproportionality. And you'll never hear me say anything other than, I'll never stop working on it.
Let me move to the next one. And what I'd like you to specifically respond to is CJ's question, which is your office attempting to address systemic problems by coming up with new solutions as they're doing in Suffolk, Delaware?
So I don't know what that prosecutor is doing that's different. I mean, I think it's the buzzword that prosecutors are now saying that they're progressive because it's something that we've been doing for a very, very long time. We have been diverting first offenders and youthful offenders and low-level offenders ever since I've been in office, not in office, so since 1990. And we have been attempting to not have people saddled with a criminal record. We recommend probations before judgment. We divert people. We send them to anger management. We send them to abuser intervention. If it's a low-level domestic violence case, we send people to counseling. Currently, we're not only prosecuting marijuana cases if it's a distribution, so it has to be a large-scale felony. We're not prosecuting low-level crimes such as the marijuana. What we're doing is we're making sure that those folks who are getting stopped, and it's usually a situation like someone is stopped for a DUI and they have drugs on them, we are trying to send them to drug counseling and trying to help them not reoffend. And so that's a focus that we have. It's also a focus with our juvenile cases as well. Our job with juveniles is to help them not reoffend and to stay out of the adult system. So they say everything old is new again. I think that's absolutely true, and we have been embracing a lot of those new techniques, old techniques, and trying to help people before it becomes too late.
Thank you. Sheriff, would you and the chief respond to the question relevant to diversity and training, and specifically what the gentleman wanted to know was, do you take into account the religious aspect of it?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I can tell you that that as a training regimen in the sheriff's office, looking back at their training records, there hasn't been much other than basic necessities for making sure that there were state certifications met. So one of the things that we're working on expanding this year is the number of days that we can offer training so that we can cover those bases, plus we can add things in. One of the things that I got as a member of the police department was some great diversity training there. Implicit bias was something that was just, it's a training that's eye-opening, and you don't realize that the things that you don't know what you don't know. And when somebody finally enlightens you to that, it's a great thing. Implicit bias was a fantastic training for us, and it is one of the specific things that we are trying to work into our training. But I would like to probably expand that. I think you're absolutely right in that. That I don't think that the religious aspects are really addressed as well in that, and that would be something I would absolutely look to add into that as a piece of that.
Thank you. Chief.
Yes, sir. First of all, I'm smiling because for 14 years full-time, I taught cultural diversity. In addition to my years of service as a police official, I was also a criminal justice and sociology professor full-time. I taught at Baltimore City Community College, lectured at the University of Baltimore, Towson University, and Coppin State University. And one of the things that I taught was cultural diversity. Like the sheriff said, we all have implicit biases. What I plan to do is personally teach at in-service training leadership, and a part of the component for leadership, I'm going to do it myself, I'm not farming it out, I think it's a part of leadership. They need to hear from the chief. I'm going to teach cultural diversity, and we're going to make sure that that's fully integrated into what we do. That's the first part about it. In addition, I want to take the same curriculum that I'm developing now, that I'm teaching in service, and I'm going to pick it out to the community. I'm planning a lecture series, and I'm working on it now, and anybody who has the time to come out will publicly announce the dates and times, but I'm going to do a chief lecture series, and we're going to talk about everything from those 3 component parts of the Constitution, the preamble, the articles, and the amendments. We're going to talk about cultural diversity, policies, and when the purpose behind it is to demystify what we do to the public. I think far too long in America, police agencies operate in secrecy, and police departments belong to the people, so the only way it's going to really belong to the people is that we come out and promulgate what we do and why we do it. And until we are willing to openly engage the community that way, this is my personal opinion, we're still going to struggle with some of the issues that I'm hearing tonight.
We have 6 people, I think, in line. It's 7:37. Ladies, it's time. I want to try to get all of the questions that they have, these last ones in line. In order to do that, I'm going to have to insert. I'm going to ask each of the people responding to be succinct, because I want everybody's question to be answered. We have 3 announcements that need to be made, all in keeping this on time. So ask a question to one person on the panel, whoever it is, so they can respond first.
Reverend Morris would cast, and actually, at least a couple of people are permissible, but I'll state the question. To increase transparency and accountability, what are your thoughts about police cameras and the need for civilian review board in Anne Arundel County? My question is to Chief Altomare and to...
No, we got one person. Chief Altomare. Response to...
Yes, totally good with body cameras. It's illegal for me to talk about budget before budget is approved by council. I think you'll hear market discussion about body cameras this year in the budget. As stated prior, I am not in favor of a civilian review board.
Yeah, this can be, I guess we just go down the line. In lieu of public safety, is there any policy in place that corrects officers for directly jeopardizing the safety of people's lives?
Who do you want to correct?
You can go right now.
Okay.
So is there policy?
Sheriff, it's on you.
So is there policy? Say that again. I just want to make sure I'm answering you properly.
Is it a policy or anything in place that corrects officers for jeopardizing the safety of people's lives?
Well, sure. I mean, that's going to be part of conduct. So the code of conduct and the conduct policy of any of our departments, which we all have conduct policy, that's going to fall directly in line with that. Yeah, that's pretty simple, and that would be, I mean, it would be a complaint, but just to kind of jump onto one of the things we answered earlier, in my office, talking about who generates complaints, we've had about a half dozen complaints in this year, or cases that we've investigated. All 6 were generated by me.
I'll talk to the chief a little bit more, because I appreciate the next question.
Next question.
Hi, this is to Chief Altomare. You brought up investing in our kids, and as a teacher at Annapolis High School, I'm wondering, what's a big factor that we could get behind to best influence investing in our kids?
Okay, I'll go quick. There's a lot of kids in this county whose parents have the money to take them to sports, to make sure they do homework. All the things that we try to do to support kids, right? We've got to have more stuff to help the parents who don't have the resources to get it done. And there's no 2 ways about it. We're talking about communities of color disproportionately in this county, right? We haven't talked about Latino kids. The depression numbers amongst Latino kids scare me to death because nobody is helping the kids. So the communities that need it, we need to step up, put our money where our mouths are. The police department are a part of it. We need to have more positive interaction with kids. And then every year we talk about teachers' raises versus police raises. We both need raises. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Yeah. You're next.
We've heard a lot of talk about the systems to make the police force and justice be a reality in this county. And yet we know that the outcomes are really different for white people and for people of color. And I'm just wondering if someone could speak to some of the things where you see those systems breaking down and how we might address some of those breakdowns in the system.
What's your question? Chief Jackson.
Oh, I don't disagree with it at all. I would argue that we do have a prison industrial complex in this country where black men are targeted as a feeder system because many prison systems are private and you need prisoners. And then if you look historically, African American men on the totem pole have been the least of them for various reasons. And again, I think all the panelists, my colleagues, and the state's attorney talked about that. It's rooted in poverty, it's rooted in drug addiction, it's rooted in all those things that when you underinvest in a community, you're going to have it. It's like trying to plant. I think the funny part about it, I know I have to be succinct, but I'll speed it up. I think the funny part about it, when you talk about those kind of things, we plant the seeds of destruction and expect prosperity. As a chief, you can't have the seeds of destruction of the community and then expect people just to behave themselves for behavior's sake. So what we have to do is use the bully pulpit of our office to make sure we affect that change. But yes, I would agree. I don't disagree that we have far too many young men in their prime years. And instead of preparing to go to college or get gainful employment, they're sitting in the jail cell, and we have to reconcile that.
Dr. Denny.
Thank you. Deidre Denny, Antelope Community College. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer. I have a lot of questions, but what can we as the community do to help support all of these bully pulpit ideas, things that have been talked about today? We didn't train ourselves into this situation, so training is not going to help us get out of it. The system is broken, and until we eradicate the system or destroy the system that gave us these outcomes, nothing's going to be different. So how do you, and it can be any of them, Carl, doesn't matter. I pick Ann. How do we as citizens help you break down the system, create something that's better so that we can all prosper in Anne Arundel County and not continue to feed the prison industrial system?
Well, this is outside my wheelhouse, but I think it goes back to investing money in children and our youth. The juvenile justice system, it used to be a good stopgap for trying to intervene before things were too late. But what we found with the juvenile justice system is by the time kids came to juvenile justice, things were really going bad at home. And, we have like a crisis intervention team, and we could have 3 to 4 to 5 times the staff. And that crisis intervention team could go and help young people if they are in the middle of a crisis. And in our county, people describe Anne Arundel County as we could be the Montgomery County on the Bay if we paid, for it, and we invested in our young people. And I don't think that there's a will right now. And I think if people demand that we spend money on our children, on our schools, and mental health, and programs for young people, sports program. How is it that there is no middle school sports in public schools? That is outrageous. I played sports. I wasn't very good at it, but I ran and I played soccer all through high school and middle school, and that just isn't here for Anne Arundel County. But we're not demanding that, right? We should be demanding that there's something for young people to do after school every day. My son's high school closed at the end of the school day. How do you close a high school library at 2:30 and then expect kids are just going to go home and be alone while their parents are at work? But we're not demanding that. Let's come up with concrete ideas. No library should be closing in a high school or a middle school when the school day ends. Let's start there. Let's start with funding school sports in middle school, and let's think about what we're not spending our money on and what we are spending our money on.
Let me quickly do this. We're about to move toward conclusion. Would you please join me in thanking our panelists and our speakers? For those of you who have not heard enough, Anne Arundel Community College, the date is February 26, 6 p.m. have invited these folks to be part of a community forum centered around hate crimes and some of the issues we talked about tonight. February 26th, at what time? 6 p.m. 6 p.m. The other thing I want to do is there's a person who wants to make a quick announcement regarding an opportunity to serve on the Quiet Waters Recreation Board. Is she still here? Would you quickly make the announcement?
My name is Catherine Haas. I'm a board member.
Speaking to the microphone there. Here you go. Speaking to the microphone.
We at the Friends of Quiet Waters are a board that is diverse. And right now, I'm the token Asian, and we have one Hispanic, and everybody else is lily white. And it's really, to me, very important, and to the board, to be diverse. So I'm hoping some people in here would be interested. The Quiet Waters Park is a really wonderful park, and we have raised a good deal of money, and if you join and work hard, you can help us spend it in the right place to make this park welcome to all people.
May they see you, those who are interested in joining the board, would you be the contact person?
Yes, I am.
All right. Following this break, meeting concluding, people interested should see her. Odessa, announcement. Nice and loud, so they hear you.
Black History Club is having a program on February 15th at 3:30. It's called The Singing Sensations. It's a choir from, I think it's from out of Baltimore, but they're great. So come on out, February 15th, 3:30. I have some flyers you can do.
Caucus, nice and loud.
Yes, on January 24th at the Pitt Memorial Center here in Annapolis, there will be a reentry resource fair. Any resources, community resources available to the community, we'd like to come and join us, bring your vendors, your tutorials and all, come on out and share with the community.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, John Telephone Center, Alfred Salvage. Just letting you all know that we're having our district night Monday, February 10th, 6 to 8 p.m. It'll be food, entertainment, right in the Maryland Senate. Have your voices heard with Senator Alfred, Delegate Payne, Delegate Henson, and Delegate Howard from Maryland South County.
Sorry, I just wanted to really quick. Sorry. The Women's Unity March is this Saturday, January 18th. We'll be marching from Whitmore Park to Susan Campbell Park, and we have a lot of great speakers, many of whom I saw in this room tonight. So please join us if you can.
Any other announcements? Yes.
Sunday, I think it's at 3 or 4 p.m., Kingdom Celebration Center, United Black Clergy are having an MLK program.
All right. Thank you. And as you said, 1 week from Sunday on the 26th will be the town hall on Medicare for All. Please bring people to Stanton Center at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, you have two members from Anne Arundel County serving in the House of Delegates, only two in Judiciary Committee. Every issue that we talked about tonight is heard in the Judiciary Committee, every single one of them. We have our first hearing, House Bill 5, that Jackie Alsop spoke about. That is our hate crime bill. I cannot do this alone. We cannot do this alone. We have a sign-up sheet right back there. Raise your hand, Genesis. Genesis is my intern, and she can sign you up if you're interested in testifying. If you want to read the bill, we brought it with us. This is your party favor tonight. You cannot leave without this. We have new witness guidelines. You cannot leave without this. And last, I have one more bill that's also going to be heard on Thursday in Ways and Means. And this bill, which pertains to election, if you have been incarcerated, and as you exit, upon release, after serving your term, you must be handed a voter registration card, and you must be handed
voter registration information. Please come out Thursday, the 16th, this Thursday. You're getting short notice because I got short notice. But I need you to be there. I need to see black and brown faces in that audience. Even if you're not testifying, that is what the Judiciary Committee needs to see. That is what the House of Delegates needs to see. These are the bills that I'm talking about tonight. You will see me again because each and every bill we talked about tonight is heard in my committee. I need your support. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Let me ask everybody, wherever you are, please stay. We're about to close out. Would you get in this circle that we do every close? Something will happen, y'all. Okay. We should have.
I got every child in the theater.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, young lady.
You ought to be holding somebody's hand that you may not have ever held before. But as we close out this meeting, I want to make 2 points. There's some people in this room tonight who are going to be honored at the Martin Luther King Jr.'s events. Good people. Thornell was one, Linda Davis is another, other people who've made tremendous contributions in this community. For those who can and want, Dr. Denny has tickets for the Martin Luther King Jr. breakfast, which is going to take place on the 20th. For those who want and can, there is a celebration of Dr. King's life at Maryland Hall, and it's free. And then on the 17th, we have this massive celebration of Dr. King's birthday. It's going to be at the Fontainebleau. It's the largest celebration of his life. Dr. King would have been 91 years old had he lived. There are people in this room who are too young to even know who he was. There's some people in the room who are old enough to remember him. They said that a man who fights for his ideas continues to live. Dr. King left us with 2 charges. And I repeat them every time we get together, because it's important for our young people to know. I hope people paid attention to tonight. I hope people listen carefully. Because if you listen carefully, and if you're a student of history, you have heard things said tonight that were said 40 years ago and 50 years ago. There's something happening in our society that we need to pay attention to. One of the things that Dr. King told us, that when we join hands as we're doing together tonight, we make a difference. And there's many examples of that. Last night, thanks to a lot of people in this room and others, we were able to get the City Council to honor an African American police chief, Joe Johnson, because people joined hands and went and met with their legislators. Every progress that we've made in this country is because people joined hands, and it has made a difference. When you hear Sandy Barnett says she needs your help, she's not joking. Change is difficult. We need people to show up to testify. But there's something else that Dr. King said to us. There's, says all the time, peace and love is his motto. But what Dr. King essentially said to us is we collectively need to learn how to love one another. And he didn't mean love from that standpoint of intimacy, just respect people as human beings.
And I want you to hear me good now. I said in the beginning, I saw a movie called Just Mercy. Some of you heard me describe this scene, and I talked about how it was that a man in front of his children was embarrassed and humiliated. And I want you to listen, because things happen right in front of you. People don't pay attention. Those of you who heard the example, there's nobody in this room who couldn't feel it. Why do you think nobody said afterwards, I feel your pain? What do you think? None of the speakers, none of the people walked up, just talked about it. That's what Dr. King was talking about. Us getting to know one another, know when we're in pain. I could go to Baltimore City. Chief Jackson's from there. And I conclude with this. We see these squeezy kids, 14, 8, 9, 10 years old. People turn their face away from them, drive away, pretend they don't see them. We can't survive as a society. We've got to care for one another. So Dr. King ultimately said that when we get there, it's learn to love one another. So if you turn to your neighbor, either on your right side or your left side, look him or her directly in the eye, just simply say, I love you. And it should not come as a surprise to anyone in the room that there's some people who just said it, don't really mean it. You can tell when somebody means it. The eyes are the window of your soul. You look somebody in the eye, you can find out who they are. So again, I ask you to look your neighbor deep in his or her eyes. Adam, make it like you really feel it. Look your neighbor in the eye and just simply say, I love you. I love you. Reverend Jones, give us a benediction.
Benediction is going to come from Jude verses 24 and 25. Now unto him who's able to keep you from falling and present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. To the only wise God, our Savior, be glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and forever. Let us respond, amen. 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 God bless you. God bless you. Amen.